But first, Labor's big lie when it comes to immigration. All weekend long, the Albanese government, bruised by its mishandling of the detainee debacle, flagged that they were going to bring down their big migration reforms as part of the mid-year budget estimates. Well, the announcement and the numbers dropped today. And spoiler alert, if you were waiting for real cuts to Australia's massive migration surge, well, you'll be waiting a little while longer. Let's have a look at what Anthony Albanese said Saturday, setting the tone for the weekend papers.
We have a plan to fix migration by ensuring Australia can get the skilled workers that Australia needs, but putting an end to any abuse and any rorts. Treasury forecasts show that migration is expected to decline substantially over the coming financial year. The new migration strategy we'll announce this week will bring migration back to sustainable levels.
Back to sustainable levels, the man said. Reasonable people might think there was going to be an actual overall cut in the numbers. But did you catch that tricky sleight of hand? Migration, he said, is expected to decline substantially. Of course, it was always going to do that after the post-COVID snapback. But then he continued, they were returning it to, quote, sustainable levels. Is that a substantial decline? Well, here's Claire O'Neill today.
We are going to make sure that we bring numbers back under control, that we build a better planned system around essential things like housing, and perhaps most importantly of all, that we build a program that delivers for the national interest.
So, bringing numbers under control, are they? Well, let's just see about that. Now, in last May's budget, and this is from budget paper number 3 for those following along at home, they projected the following migration intake. In 2022-23, 400,000 people. 2023-24, 315,000. The next year, 260,000 for the next 3 years after that to the 26-27 financial year, for a total across those 5 years of 1,495,000. Now, of course, those numbers were wildly optimistic, as we know. And then they put out their figures today. Those project 510,000 in the 22-23 year, which indicates how little faith we can put in any of the projections. Then 375,000 down to 250, and then up to 255, and then down to 235 again. The total for those playing along at home is 1.625 million people. So even when they're getting it under control, it's still out of control compared to what they had estimated just in the May budget. And note that even with the most optimistic tweaks, they're only projecting a drop of a relatively scant few thousand a year in those final few years. That is, if you believe them, and not that this is just an attempt to make themselves look tough on borders and immigration, which is an issue where they are clearly bleeding support. Now, even being generous and taking the 3 furthest out years, again, they are only tipping a difference of 125,000 migrants over 3 years. And, still again, more than 1.5 million new migrants over 5 years. That's more than an entire Adelaide. And you can bet the architecture to house them won't be anywhere near as charming as that city. And at a time when housing approvals are at a historic low, by the way. Now, I'll tell you, I spoke to Claire O'Neill's office shortly before we went to air, and they told me that, well, yes, the numbers would be far higher without the reforms they announced today, especially around the student visa sector, which, to be fair, was absolutely full of warts and which they do seem to have a commitment to tackle. So well done to the government on that. But if the projections were wrong before and the actual numbers turned out to be much higher than they predicted last year or earlier this year, I'm not sure why that won't continue to happen in the years to come. But as the saying goes, wait, there's more. Because there's another aspect to all of this that I think we need to be very concerned about and which we don't talk about enough. Previous generations of migrants came here to Australia to help build the country and the economy, yes, but also to become Australians. Books and films like They're a Weird Mob celebrated new cultures coming to Australia, but also documented the tension as these newcomers did everything they could to become Australians. Now, though, we live in an age when Labour, and indeed the entire left side of politics, feels ashamed to be Australian. What sort of message does it send, you have to wonder, to people who want to come to Australia for all the various freedoms it provides and opportunities it offers, to hear that the nation's High Commissioner in London has cancelled Australia Day, like he was presiding over some woke inner city council? I tell you what, no matter how hairy-chested Labour tries to look on this issue, their attempts always fall flat because stories like this always reveal their true nature. Beyond that, new migrants to Australia also face an education system for their kids that will teach them that modern Australia is illegitimate and devoid of culture, and governments that celebrate multiculturalism, fine, but refuse to also promote a shared Australian culture. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for these guys. Did they just come here to contribute to Australian GDP and keep the country from tipping into a formal and not just per capita recession? Increasingly, that seems to be how the government sees all of us, not as individuals, but as economic units and members of ethnic or other identity subgroups to be played against one another. No wonder that besides all the stress these newcomers are putting on our housing markets and other infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals, the schools, there's a real cost being paid in societal cohesion. Last month, the Scanlon Foundation found that the proportion of Australians who feel a strong sense of belonging in this country has declined. Sorry, it's plummeted, actually, from 77% in 2007 to just 48% this year. Only 33%, just a third of us, felt great pride in the Australian way of life, and only 40% of us thought there was any point in trying to maintain that. Well, given the way the government has sapped confidence in the very idea of Australia, while encouraging a historically high intake of migrants to treat the nation as a dormitory more than a home, is it any wonder